It started innocuously. A friendly text here, a chat with someone at work there. I told myself it was harmless, that nothing could harm the bond Tom and I shared. But as the days passed, I realized that my emotional distance was growing. He didn't notice at first. He was still the man I had married, still caring and steady. But I had begun to change. The little lies, the skipped texts, the secret smiles on my phone, they all started to pile up in ways I couldn't undo. I felt guilt for a moment, then excitement, and then an unsteady mix of both. I was aware of the shifting dynamic, but I was too captivated by it to stop. One evening, it all came to a head. We were at home, the living room softly lit, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence that had become more common between us. Tom sat on the couch, arms folded, a quiet tension emanating from him that I had learned to recognize. I approached, trying to bridge the distance with a small smile, but he barely looked up. "We need to talk," he said, and his voice was calm, unnervingly calm, like the eye of a storm. I nodded, my chest tightening with anticipation and fear. He didn't yell, didn't storm. He just told me what I already knew in my bones. He had felt my absence, had sensed the growing distance, had noticed the unspoken lies. And most painfully, he told me he no longer trusted me. The words landed like stones in my chest. I wanted to protest, to tell him he was overreacting, that I still loved him. But as I looked into his eyes, steady and unwavering, I knew that the trust we once shared had eroded beyond repair. And in that moment, a dark realization settled over me. I had created this chasm with my own hands. I had been seeking something outside, some excitement I believed I was missing, and in doing so, I had shattered the foundation of my marriage. In the days that followed, the silence between us grew heavier. I tried to reach him, tried to offer reassurances, tried to reclaim what had been lost, but Tom had retreated into a space that I could not enter. Every attempt at conversation ended with polite but distant words. Every gesture of affection met with cautious acceptance rather than warmth. I began to feel suffocated by the consequences of my own choices. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the pull of my own desire. The emptiness that had driven me to stray in the first place seemed to widen with every passing day, and before I knew it, I found myself crossing the line I had promised I never would again. It wasn't a moment of thoughtless impulse. It was deliberate, a choice I made knowing full well the risk. I met someone who offered attention, understanding, and the kind of connection that I hadn't felt in months. And just like that, my secret life began to bloom alongside the remnants of my marriage. It was intoxicating, a heady mix of guilt and pleasure that I couldn't untangle. I told myself I could keep it hidden, that I could manage the consequences, that I could have both without losing either. But deep down, I knew the truth. The deception would not remain hidden forever. The moment of reckoning arrived sooner than I expected. One afternoon, I returned home to find Tom waiting, his expression unreadable but heavy with the gravity of everything unsaid. He didn't raise his voice, didn't storm in anger. He simply looked at me, and in that look, I saw the hurt I had inflicted, the betrayal I had carried out, the trust one had destroyed. He spoke slowly, deliberately, each word punctuated by the weight of finality. He told me he knew, not just about my emotional distance, not just about the lies, but about the other person, about the affair I had thought I could conceal. I tried to explain, to offer excuses, to make him understand the emptiness I had felt, the loneliness that had driven me to seek attention elsewhere. But he didn't listen. Not really. He had already made up his mind. "I cannot stay with someone I cannot trust," he said quietly. And just like that, the life we had built together, the home, the routines, the shared moments, began to crumble in an instant. There was no argument, no shouting, no dramatic confrontation. There was only the quiet, irrevocable truth. He would not forgive, and I had no defense. As he gathered his things and left, I watched in stunned silence. The apartment felt emptier than it had in months, as if the walls themselves were mourning the loss. And in that emptiness, I began to feel the weight of my choices, the reality of what my actions had wrought. I had sought excitement, connection, and validation outside of my marriage, and in doing so, I had lost the one person who had truly loved me without condition. I realized then that the thrill I had chased was fleeting, and the devastation it left behind was permanent. Days turned into weeks, and the initial shock of his departure gave way to a numb routine. I went through the motions of life, but the vibrancy had gone. I replayed the moments over and over in my mind, wondering if there had been a way to prevent it. If there had been a choice I could have made that would have spared us both this pain. But hindsight is merciless, and the truth was inescapable. I had betrayed the one person who had deserved my loyalty, and the consequences were absolute. And yet, even in this bleakness, a part of me began to confront the reality of my own desire. The affair I had entered after feeling abandoned brought temporary relief, a hollow sense of being wanted, being seen. But it also magnified the emptiness that had driven me there. Each interaction reminded me of what I had lost and why. The very thing I had sought to fill a void had only highlighted the depth of the chasm I had created in my own life.